is Phil Rees. I've spent much of my career meeting men and women called terrorists in the West. It used to be said that one man's terrorist is another man's freedom fighter. But after 9/11, that seemed to change.
Either you are with us, or you are with the terrorists.
Western politicians list dozens of terrorist organizations. I'll be breaking bread with those labeled terrorists by the West and ask, when does a man have the right to fight without being called a terrorist? The tribal areas of Pakistan, the front line of the West's war on terror. For outsiders, it's one of the most dangerous places on earth. At a secret location, a rare interview with a senior Taliban commander. These men believe their duty is to expel Western armies from nearby Afghanistan.
If you follow the right path, you are my brother. But if you follow Bush, you will face suicide attacks. We will run you over with a vehicle. We will chop off your head. I will even sacrifice myself.
Pakistan is a nation on the edge of a precipice and the cornerstone of the West's war on terror.
The specter of having 166 million who fall to extremism, that seems to indicate to me that all of South Asia could be ablaze.
I'll go to the birthplace of modern jihad and find a country at war with itself. Pakistan is a nuclear power with an unstable government. According to the West, it is also home to the leadership of Al-Qaeda. After 9/11, the United States told the Pakistan government that it must play a pivotal role in the West's war on terror. But this is deeply unpopular amongst the people of this conservative Muslim nation. I'm heading for the western reaches of Pakistan, the northwest frontier. We're on our way to Peshawar, a town on the frontier with Afghanistan. It's also on the front line of the West's war on terror and a staging post for the rebellion against Western forces in Afghanistan. The frontier province is the home of the Pashtun people. For centuries, they've battled invaders who tried to control their lands. Peshawar and its people have been shaped by this violence. The Persians, Mongols, Sikhs, and the British have all occupied the city. The province is in turmoil once again and facing a different kind of invasion. The Pakistan government has sent thousands of troops into Pashtun lands to confront Islamist rebels. On the outskirts of Peshawar is one of the largest religious schools in Pakistan. The pupils are known as Taliban, the Arabic word for a student of Islam. It's presented by much of the Western media as a factory for terrorists. I first came to the Jamia Hakana Madrasa in 1988, when it was at the center of the call for a liberation struggle, jihad, against the Russian occupation of neighboring Afghanistan. Money from around the world funded holy warriors, or mujahideen, from this school. They crossed the border to expel Soviet troops. In those days, I dressed as a mujahid and, along with most Western journalists, celebrated the right of tribal warriors to fight foreign invaders. They were lauded as freedom fighters. The school was also at the center of the Taliban takeover of Afghanistan in 1995. Many senior members of the former Taliban government were pupils here, including its fugitive leader, Mullah Omar. I've come to see one of Pakistan's most experienced religious politicians, who's also known as the father of the Taliban. Sami-ul Haq recalled our meeting in the 1980s and how the West's attitude to the Mujahideen has changed.
We ask America, what's the difference between the situation then and now? Then everything was legitimate according to you. It was a war of freedom. Now you call it terrorism. If this is terrorism, then there would be no way for oppressed and subjugated nations to fight for their freedom.
The West's proxy war in Afghanistan fostered a belief that given faith and commitment, a group of poorly armed men could defeat a superpower. It has inspired the region, whose people found a new confidence in their religion and identity. At a nearby restaurant, I went to see an old friend, Rahimullah Yousafzai. We recalled our first meeting in 1988. But the first card I ever put in there was your card. Me. He's one of the most respected journalists in the tribal areas and conducted the last known interview with Osama bin Laden. He's taking me back to a district of Peshawar where 20 years ago he told me an important story was unfolding. At the time I ignored his advice. It involved the founders of what would become Al-Qaeda.
Here there was a place on the left, which was one of the places used by the Arabs. And I'm sure Osama bin Laden, Abdullah Azam, Ayman al-Zawahiri, everybody has been here to this place.
Well, when I went there, of course, I discussed it, and we said nothing important was going on there. Well,
nothing important outside, but inside.
Well, yeah, but it didn't seem. We missed the importance of the idea of jihad, how potent that was, and how its effect would linger for so long. You know, I mean, we just missed it.
Yeah, that's true.
In these houses, Rahimullah met fighters from around the world, all brought together by jihad against the Soviet Union.
They would come here on the way to Afghanistan, stay here for a while, and then also the guys who had already fought in Afghanistan or trained, on the way back they would stop here and stay here. This was like, you know, for rest and recreation.
The ideas born behind these gates apply today against a different enemy.
There is now a new generation of fighters who are willing to die for Islam and for their homeland. And these guys, you can call them Taliban, militants, you know, Al-Qaeda, whatever. But these people are going to stay here. They won't go away. They won't give up.
At the far side of town, a border crossing on the road to the Afghan capital, Kabul. It's a vital transit route for NATO forces fighting the Taliban and Al-Qaeda in Afghanistan. On the other side of the border, some 100 kilometers away, the United States Army has stationed troops in the desolate Korangal Valley.
Make sure that you're actually looking and scanning to identify weapons or them carrying stuff. Don't just try to shoot somebody because you see them, a group of dudes walking.
I'm joining 30 US troops at an isolated base on the front line of this war, Firebase Vegas. There are reports that Taliban forces are in the area.
40 individuals is what the report's saying, staging for one of the bigger attacks on Firebase Vegas. So it's going to be important that everybody's on their game this morning. Let's go.
Yeah, come on, good.
We're just getting spaced out, so in the event that we do get hit, we're not all in one area.
Sergeant Martinez and his men are joined by soldiers from the Afghan army. They set off on daily patrols in search of Taliban militants. Their main task is to cut off supply lines for fighters and weapons brought in from Pakistan. The border is only 20 kilometers away. This is dangerous work. These patrols act as bait, designed to draw the Taliban from their hideouts. The terrain is also ideal for guerrilla warfare.
They're just kind of watching for that one vulnerable individual or one point in the terrain, and they'll just let off a few rounds and try to ambush us and take off.
The soldiers arrive at a village. Houses are searched for weapons. The villagers are suspected of supporting the Taliban. These are the same Pashtun people as in the tribal areas of Pakistan. They share a language and culture. The border means little to the people here. While there is no Pashtun nation on a map, the people are fiercely proud of their identity. They see outsiders on their land as an insult to their honor. This man returned to his village after being in jail for 2 years, accused of being a Taliban fighter. He now says he no longer cares about politics. The presence of children in the village is a good sign for the patrol.
The last report we received was they were going to try to move the kids out of the area, so they move the kids out. They move all the children
before an attack.
Right before an attack, so that way, once we start shooting back, we're not going to injure any children. That's if they coordinate it well with the elders. If not, you see how easy it is. Some individual can come down here, shoot at us from the top of this house and take off. And where are we returning fire to? The top of this house.
Suddenly, the patrol receives reports of Taliban spotters watching them in the tree line. So you think they're watching us?
Oh, definitely. They already know we're here. So we don't want to stay in one area. We want to stay static so that way, they can't fix us.
The platoon's tour of duty will last for a further 6 months, but the US involvement in Afghanistan will be much longer. Do you see an end game to the war on terror here?
Honestly, I think we're going to have to get to the people that live here. But if we have insurgents continuously coming in the valley and bringing weapons and all kinds of stuff in here, it's not going to end. So we definitely need the villagers that live here, or the Korangalis that live here
to be on your side.
To be on our side. We're not asking them to fight. We're asking them to tell us when these guys are coming.
But that's not happening, is it?
That's definitely not happening. So that makes our jobs a lot harder.
Next, I'll speak to the militants crossing the border to fight the Americans and examine how the West's war on terror is causing turmoil in Pakistan. To understand what's happening on the Afghan border, I need to visit Rawalpindi, the home of Pakistan's intelligence service, the ISI. The ISI nurtured the Taliban in the 1990s and has a central role in events now unfolding. Pakistan claims to be an American ally in its war on terror, but not everything here is what it seems. I've come to a gated community full of mansions. It's an estate for retired generals. And I've come to meet a man who was head of the Pakistani intelligence services at the height of the Afghan war against the Russians. But he still has his fingers in many pies. Does the war on terror mean anything?
Bunkum. It is out of George Bush's hat. No, it's nothing there. This is nonsense.
General Hamid Gul effectively controlled the Mujahideen in the 1980s. He funneled money from Saudi Arabia and the CIA to jihadi groups.
What Taliban are doing is perfectly understandable. They will never stop crossing the border to help their brothers because they think they are in distress. It's a good cause, it's a moral cause, and this is a cause that have always recurred in history.
So basically you're saying that until America leaves Afghanistan and the Western powers, NATO, you see no peace on the borders of Pakistan?
No, none at all.
There's a natural and unavoidable tie-in between success in Afghanistan and success in Pakistan. I think it's a problem for everyone, from the government of Pakistan to the government of Afghanistan to the coalition forces.
The Pakistan government's public support for the United States war on terror has provoked widespread anger, made worse by American missile strikes against so-called terrorist targets inside Pakistan. The spectre of the Pakistan army fighting its own people is also causing tension within the military. There are now open calls in the capital Islamabad for jihad and an overthrow of the pro-Western government. This demonstration is outside the Red Mosque. At one time, it provided sanctuary for fighters traveling to Afghanistan. But in July 2007, Pakistan security forces stormed the mosque, killing at least 100 people, probably many more. The siege of this mosque proved to be a turning point. Osama bin Laden became directly involved, calling on the people of Pakistan to rise up against their president, who he called an infidel. The enemy was no longer simply the Western forces in Afghanistan. It was the Pakistani government and military as well. Islamist groups demanded that Pakistan end its support for the West's war in Afghanistan.
I think at the popular level, the war in Afghanistan was always unpopular. It has certainly destabilized parts of our country, the frontier. But I think the bottom line was the US was going to do it, was going to intervene. It was better that we were able to at least influence what was happening rather than be on the other side and be penalized. You have to be realistic. We are not going to go looking for a fight with the United States.
The United States is, in effect, asking the Pakistan government to order its army to kill its own citizens. In doing so, it's fueling support for the Taliban. I'm heading towards the Taliban heartland, deep inside the tribal areas. In this region, the government has little influence. I've arranged a meeting with a unit of the Pakistani Taliban. The fertile plains of western Pakistan turn to desert before rising to the mountains of Afghanistan. The first stop on my journey was a school run by a local politician, Shah Abdulaziz. You have 420 students here. He's a vocal supporter of the Taliban and critic of the Pakistan government's support for the West.
Our government is a kind of American slave. Pakistan's independence and honor have been given away to America. The government's fighting someone else's war, and we condemn this.
They told me that the West fails to understand them. They only ask for what the West takes for granted, the freedom to choose their way of life and the right to fight an invading army. The school is only a 3-hour drive from the capital, Islamabad, but the government has no role here. Shah Abdulaziz has funded the school himself to prevent any state involvement. He provides free education to young orphans.
I look after all these children. Their fathers and mothers are dead. They are from the Pashtun tribal areas. Most of their fathers have been martyred doing jihad in Afghanistan.
That's the style. Okay. Then you put it on me. Is that right? Is that perfect? That's good. Well, shukriya. Thank you. As evening drew in, I was taken to a location that I was told not to divulge. A Taliban commander and his unit had arranged to meet us on the following day. Well, we've been traveling all day, and we've reached this safe house here. I'm not exactly sure where we are, but this is our bed for the night, with the open skies above us. In the morning, the Pakistani Taliban arrive. They move freely around the tribal areas, though are careful to avoid direct contact with the Pakistan army. The commander gave his name as Haji Yaqub. He asked us not to show his face. He's a veteran of the first Afghan war against the Russians. Now his enemy is the American and NATO troops in Afghanistan. Even though he's from the tribal area of Pakistan, his loyalty is to the leader of the Taliban in Afghanistan.
Our leader is Mullah Omar, and we're his mujahideen.
The Americans and the West says that, you know, you're from Pakistan, Afghanistan's another country, it's nothing to do with you.
There is no difference between us, no division between Afghanistan and Pakistan. If it is jihad, jihad is compulsory. Non-Muslims and their friends are wrong to think that Afghanistan and Pakistan are separate. We are Muslims wherever we are, even Muslims in China. We support them.
Both the governments of Pakistan and Afghanistan have offered to negotiate with the Taliban, but only if men like the commander sever ties with Al-Qaeda. Can the Taliban separate themselves from Al-Qaeda and bin Laden?
I don't accept that the Taliban and Al-Qaeda are two separate entities. They are one body. Firstly, they're Muslims, and secondly, they're brothers in jihad. These people came here 35 years ago. They got married here, and we gave them our lands. They're not foreigners. They're Muslims, and they're mujahideen.
The West says that it will be in Afghanistan for generations. How do you see that unfolding?
I think they have become insane. When one Talib is martyred, 50 more will take his place. Nobody has told me this. I've seen this myself. I tell the Europeans and Pakistanis, don't think that by dropping bombs you will finish the Taliban. No way. If they come with the right attitude, these issues could be resolved by talks, not war. Muslims have a great sense of honor. We are Pashtun. We are not afraid of war.
The West's war on terror, with all its military might, has been unable to conquer an idea born in Pakistan 3 decades ago. Instead, the war has united the Pashtuns behind jihad and allied them with the West's enemies.
Not all the Pashtuns are involved in the militancy or the insurgency, but the general sentiment of the population has now become anti-foreigner. And it's a bad environment in which to fight a counterinsurgency. There was no need to push them into the quarter of the Al-Qaeda. Well, we managed to do that now.
Narai Takbir! Allahu Akbar! The more the West puts pressure on Pakistan, the greater the dangers of a full-scale civil war and the possibility that Pakistan turns on the West.
All we have to say is we declare jihad. Then the Muslim youth from all over the Muslim world will rally. This is just one hair breadth which divides at this moment, because things have come to a stage, to a threshold, where if jihad is declared by a state authority, then it's going to be a very, very big affair. It's going to be jihad international.
This is the West's nightmare, but one that its policies in the Pashtun lands may be turning into a reality.